Bill Guertin, how's that for an intro?
Man, that was awesome. I was wanting to jump out at 10-1. I wanted to be right at the starting line.
Anybody in broadcasting would be like, dude, you got to cut that intro down. That the bumper's a little too long.
It's all good. I love it.
So Bill Guertin, like 13. I got that right. Yeah. So you're the chief learning officer, amongst other things, at ISBI 360. But I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how you got to this point. You started off like, I worked in radio too. You started off in radio way back as kind of that foundation for sales, marketing, listener, building an audience, right? And then you wrote a book. Then you wrote a pretty damn good book, 800-Pound Gorilla. There's a bunch of other things in between that, but then you spent a good portion of your career working with pro sports teams on sales, the foundation of sales with, you name the league, the NFL, the NBA, minor league baseball, MLS, NHL, the list goes on. And now recently you transitioned over on top of everything else you're doing, consulting, keynote speaking. You've layered on to ISBI 360. Let's talk about that.
Well, like everyone else, when the pandemic hit, we felt like we had a product, but no one in which to use the product with. And to be clear, our product is a training product, a virtual training product with 7 different disciplines, including ticket sales, customer service, leadership, and so on. And we had many, many clients throughout all the major leagues in Canada, in Mexico. And then the pandemic hit, and many of the people we trained were laid off. And so we sat around in September and October and said, well, gosh, we can put this company on ice for a little while until we actually have people to train. But we have this asset, this training asset. And so what we chose to do is to hire many of those ticket sales reps that were displaced through no fault of their own. And we put them to work. We brought them into our training program, which is the asset we had. We kept them sharp because if you don't use that, you lose it. And then we began to rent out those reps on a rent-a-rep program to give them the kind of exposure that they needed to these teams because they wanted to be back in sports. This was a group that really they didn't want to go do medical tech sales. They didn't want to go sell Grubhub. They wanted to be in sports. And so we wanted to try to help them out, get them together, work collaboratively, keep their sales training sharp, and then bring them out and on a 90-day period to people who really needed the sales help, but could not afford to hire full-time reps.
What is that thing? I mean, you go back to, this whole career process, and you've been working with salespeople and managing salespeople forever.
Yeah.
What are those characteristics and traits, when you see and meet a sales rep for the first time? Do you know automatically that this kid's got it? Or do you know that?
I don't. And here's why. People have gotten really good at selling themselves beyond what they're capable of. There are really good professional interviewers, which it's the bane of our existence because it's our job to try to flesh those out and to find out who really are the contenders from the pretenders. It has become a little more difficult, and it's become more costly because the cost of a bad hire has risen dramatically in the last 10 years. And so we can't afford to make a bad hire. But the things I look for that at least tell me there is a spark here is great eye-to-eye contact. I mean, it sounds really basic, but actually someone who can look you in the eye and discuss their career and have answers to the questions that you offer relative to their career and their intent and where they really want to go in life. If someone says, well, I'm just going to kind of roll with it and kind of see what happens, that's not much of an interview. I need to see, in my interviews, I need to see someone who has a clear direction, who may not know exactly where they're going, but they know where they need to go first. And so those are just a couple of the characteristics I look for right away.
So do you find with going through this process, you can't always judge a book by its cover, number one, you learn that after a while. Do you find sometimes even somebody who comes across as not that professional interviewer, because I agree with you, some people are professional at fundraising for startups, but they can't actually operate a business. Do you find sometimes people that are introverted? So you got some of these career seekers, these young professionals coming up. Could you still train them to be great sales reps?
Absolutely. And it depends on the culture that they're going to be put into and the kind of selling they will be doing. If there's a lot of face-to-face interaction, if you need to have a lot of interview style face-to-face selling, perhaps an introvert would not be the best fit. But if you're doing 100 calls a day and you're banging them out, I would actually prefer some people who are introverted, because they will sit at their desk and they will grind it out every single day, and they will make sure that they make minimally that number of calls. And so, to your point, Rob, you really have to know what the job description is before you can begin to slot the right personalities into them.
You know, the great thing that I've learned from I'm going to shift over a little bit on this one, because you talk about pivots. So I'm going to get off the kind of career kids for a second. When you talk about a shift and a pivot, some people pivot in their careers, other people pivot in your business. You've done a remarkable pivot, right? You saw where the industry was going. You saw this pool of talent that's sitting out there now, and you pivoted over to, let's become free agent sales reps, right? Let's pivot our business. Our core business, like you said, was disrupted. You quickly pivoted it over. Talk about how you did that, your mindset, how you changed gears as quick as you did.
Well, please don't credit me. We have a very smart team at ISBI 360 that all get together and hash out ideas. We talk out what ifs a lot. And one of those what ifs actually came from Brett Zalaski, who is a fantastic sales trainer in his own right, began talking about, well, what if we did this rent-a-rep sort of thing? Our CEO, Doug Quinn, thought that was a marvelous idea, began to flesh that out, and everyone kind of had their part in making this thing worthwhile. And so everyone in the circle that we have as owners really came together and said, how can we make this happen? And everyone took a portion of that and made it fly. We really did not have any sort of strategy going forward other than to wait for the virus to flesh out. And so we had the opportunity. We knew that many reps were hurting. And so it became as much a humanitarian challenge as it did a new business challenge. And what we have found is that this group that has been with us has really bonded. It's almost like a Vietnam experience, having found other people that have gone through the same thing. And so we're proud to say that we've now placed full-time, after the 90-day rental period, over 20 individuals so far. And we have many, many more that we plan to place in 2021 and beyond into full-time positions after that initial 90-day rental period.
Yeah, I love it. I just think it's a brilliant move on your behalf and on the team's behalf with Doug and everybody else involved.
Thank you.
So talk about then a career pivot. A lot of returning military who are coming back and getting back into the civilian life, and they want to look for an opportunity within the sports industry, or somebody that started off, got their sport management degree, then started selling insurance, or started working for enterprise, or got into an industry that just bores the hell out of them. You know, what is it about that group of folks that come into your ecosystem, and what do you look for? How do you train? How do you provide them with the mindset and the skills that they need then to kind of get into the industry?
Well, you mentioned a few things that I really like to see: military experience, enterprise. Love to talk to waitresses and bartenders, because they're people that are public facing, that have to deal with very trying situations and still maintain a fresh face. These are people that are under very duress style conditions, can be their best. And so those are the kinds of people that I actually look for. And so there is another trend that we're seeing, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but many people will hire Division I athletes, or athletes within any collegiate environment that have been recruited specifically as an athlete, simply because they have a never say die sort of attitude. Sometimes, depending how the hire goes, if they're a big fan of the team, sometimes that doesn't work out all that well, because they end up really enjoying the fact that their name is next to the logo on the business card, and they kind of check out a little bit. So we don't want to see that, but we want to see people that have a love for success and not necessarily a love for the team or the sport. But those are some of the characteristics I love to see, Rob, and I'm glad you mentioned all of those, because if you are one of those in those categories and you've been challenged, there is hope for that, because people will essentially put you at the top of the list in terms of callbacks, and they'll want to talk to you.
You know, I'm a big fan of talking about, I even have it in my book too, pathetic plug that was, of don't be a fan of the team or the sport, be a fan of the fan experience. And if you become a servant mentality of whether it's ticket sales, sponsorship sales, VIP sales, then if you become a fan of that, because everybody's a fan of the sport, that's why you're working in sports, but if you become fan of the business and become fan of the quality of the lifestyle that you're bringing to it, but also, and to your point about student athletes, I love walk-on student athletes. I'll hire those kids all day long. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what degree they have. If they were a walk-on student athlete, I want them to work for me because they're going to always try to prove themselves.
And we have found that to be true too in our new business now with ISBI 360 with the virtual sales network. Many of those student athletes who were not able to get internships their senior years are finding success with us, training for a 2 to 4 week period of time, and then going right to the phones with a team that we're renting them out for.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing. There's so much good karma and energy around that. So let's talk a little bit about what you're starting to see now with remote sales, this digital social relationships, virtual coffees. Have you seen the mindset shift and the culture shift from kind of the folks with the gray hair like us who've been around for a while are used to smiling and dialing? You shouldn't really prospect too much on LinkedIn. How much has all of that stuff changed in your mind, and what do you see the reaction from the marketplace?
Well, if you read anything about technology and what's happened, we've really forwarded about 5 to 10 years in technology because we've been forced into it. We've had to be forced into this virtual tech that we're using right here. We've been forced into having virtual coffees and things that we wouldn't normally be comfortable with. We've had to become comfortable. And unfortunately, along the way, we've made some pretty bad stumbles. And we've had some pretty bad Zoom meetings and some people that looked like they were in the witness protection program trying to sell a ticket package to someone when they didn't have the right lighting or the right cameras. And so we're getting better, and I do see improvement in the way in which we are presenting. I think people are now finally getting the hang of we're going to do this for quite a while, or at least for the short term. And perhaps even as we get into more face-to-face and the virus begins to dissipate, I think we're going to see a percentage just like we are right now that will continue to prefer this method of salesmanship. And so this will not go away. Those who think that if they wait out the virus, they'll be just fine and they'll be able to go back to the way things used to be, I'm afraid this is going to be here for a while longer.
The witness protection program. That's fantastic. I love that.
You knew exactly what I meant, Rob. You've seen those people.
Oh, yeah. It's like take off your baseball hat, right? Right. Don't have the light behind you. Like simple things, right? Put the
camera angles.
Right.
I've looked at so many nostrils from people that had their cameras way down here or way up here. They looked like they were at 30 pounds on them. It's really, if it weren't sad, it would be comical.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. Do you see teams and leagues? Oh, so say I'm coming out, I'm a talented, I don't want to move to Cleveland. I'm living in Sarasota, Florida. I don't want to live in the north, but I'm a rock star biz dev person. Do you start seeing that upper management saying, you know what? I want the talent. So what if we just fly up a week, a month, but you could live down there and you work remotely? If you could sell, where does it matter where you are? Do you see that changing?
I think we're going to see some hybrid packages like that for the right talent. They won't do it for everyone, but for a person they really have to fight for, that somebody really, really wants to sell for Cleveland but wants to live in Tampa. Goodness. I remember many years ago, Tom Joyner, who was the fly jock, if you remember this back your radio Rob days, where Tom Joyner would fly back and forth every day from Chicago to Dallas to do a live show in the morning in Chicago and an afternoon show live in Dallas. And Tom Joyner was worth back and forth. They called him the fly jock because he literally took an airplane every day. I think that's a little extreme. I don't know that we'll see that, but for the right talent and for the right circumstance, if somebody really has an amazing resume, and talent is becoming harder to find. One of the things that ended up happening during this whole shift a year ago is people said, well, we'll let them go now because there'll be this plethora of people available once things get back to normal. Well, what's happened is people have dissipated off to other places, and that talent that was going to be sitting there on the sidelines is not nearly as prevalent as they once thought. And so there is a huge scramble right now for the best and the brightest. And so to your point, if somebody said, I'll come to work for you if you fly me home 1 week a month or whatever that arrangement happened to be, I would not be surprised to see that in the next 6 months.
Of course, I remember the Tom Joyner morning show. It was legendary. It was fantastic. Yeah, it's a great story. I was just telling someone about that a month ago. I was like, you imagine how many miles he must have had? Anyways, but I agree with you. I see it happening now, especially in higher ed, and certainly a lot of areas because of just online learning. I think, it's interesting. I think students are now kind of coming out and saying, I could work remotely in a really cool location, get my degree from Cornell and live in Miami and then maybe work. I'm by your senior year, you're kind of over it anyway. So you got all your fun out and being a college kid out. So I think there's a huge shift happening. But so talk about this last question, but what, maybe last, I don't know. I might, depends on how you answer it. Talk about advice, advice you would give to anybody out there going back to that career seeker coming out, graduation's happening, markets opening up again. Advice that you would give to them, like, what do you do now to break through, to get the attention of that manager, of that management team, from either a college student again, or someone wants to re-enter back into community, do these placement services work? Is this online job boards? Are they effective? How do you break through either using LinkedIn, your network, or just a cold call to that person? What's your advice to them?
Wow. That is a very loaded question and has lots of different deep pockets that you just mentioned. I want to talk a little bit about personality, as you mentioned earlier, that may factor into how you approach your job search. If you are an introvert, please don't try to be an extrovert by going into that, because you will fail simply because it's not your style. There's a way in which to approach that job that is given to your style. And I'll suggest a couple of different ways in which to be able to do that for the introverts and then for the extroverts. A question you need to ask yourself, and that people who are hiring are asking these recruits, are this: how did you spend your COVID vacation? What did you do during this year that we had in lockdown that you did to better yourself? What did you pick up? What did you do with that time that you had? The most productive individuals are the ones that are getting the better looks right now. If you said, well, I went to, I worked at, is what I could do. I delivered a little bit, or I really found myself. I read 6 books and these are the 6 books. If somebody says, well, gee, I went through Ozark 3 times, it really doesn't help you in the job interview. What you need to show is initiative. In hard times that we've been through, what people need to see, hiring managers need to see, is someone that isn't going to crumble when it gets tough. There are some people that will not come back to our stadiums. Bar none, for no reason. They do not want, maybe they're immunocompromised, or they had someone who passed away, or several people there's passed away and they don't choose to want to go back. There are too many painful memories there. Some people are just germaphobes and they believe they're everywhere, and so they don't want to go there. These are difficult sales to have to make, and we need people that are resilient, that can take that and can continue the fight to call over and over again. And so we're looking for people that actually were resourceful during that time and can be resourceful again. If you've proven yourself during the pandemic in one way or another, be sure to bring that out in your resume. Now, if you're an introvert, if you're not really the type of person that brings themselves out, do a video of yourself or do something that makes you stand out that wouldn't be done by everyone else. If you're afraid to talk to someone, talk to the camera lens. I got started in radio that way, Rob. I was scared to death of people. Microphones didn't scare me, people did. So it was wonderful for me. I could be in a room with just myself and a microphone, and I was just fine. Fortunately, I got over that. But to the point of the introverts needing to get out, do something that you feel good about that can differentiate you on video.
Yeah, yourself and a microphone in a room, that's a whole different podcast that we're going to have to bite your back for. So how do people get a hold of you? What's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you, to look at any information online and set up a call?
I would love to reach out. Anyone that would want to reach out to me, I will answer every email personally at bill@isbi360.com. It's right there at isbi360.com. You can reach out to me. I'll even give a cell, 815-549-9134. I answer all my calls, even the robocalls, which drives my wife crazy, but I do it anyway. And to take a look at what's going on in this world, the virtual sales network is isbi360.com/VSN. Take a look at it. We're hiring right now for those rent-a-reps, and we do the training. It's free. You get a 2 to 4 week training program, and then you're assigned to a team for 90 days if you do the work.
Well, fantastic. I know that you're going to be getting inundated with calls from your extended car warranties. So those are coming. Those are following. Yeah.
Can't wait. I'm sure my enterprise rep will be calling any minute.
Bill Guertin, thank you so much for your time and sharing with us and our listeners all your knowledge, experience, and your passion for what you do. So always good to connect with you, sir.
It was my pleasure, Rob. Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of Bill, this is Rob. You're watching Game Plan You today. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.